Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. Yes, we're back. We're back. It's been a little bit, but yeah, we're doing good. We got a lot of things to talk about today. So before I get started, I do have to mention that, well, we are hiring. Yes. What a shocker. If you watch the show, we're always hiring. So make sure you check out the link below in the show notes, and check out foundrymakes.com/careers. Hiring lots of interesting people. So I am excited to jump in and talk to my friend Jon. Jon, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kurt.
That's good to see you. So you're at Breakthrough. Tell me about Breakthrough and what's the work you do there? And what do you do there?
Sure. I mean, can I also plug that we're also hiring
Yes,
in case
please. Yes,
for
yes.
very interesting people as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Jon Lenz, managing director of Breakthrough. We solve complex digital marketing and technology challenges to unlock company growth. Our mission is to create a sustainable culture of team growth and development that drives business results. Our 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal is to be the best marketing and technology firm in the Midwest. And we were tremendously fortunate to be awarded Best Digital Marketing Firm in Minnesota this year,
I saw
and
that.
strive to, and we
Congratulations.
strive. Well, thank you, but we strive to execute on Michelin star standards, and I know that you and I are going to talk about that a little bit later as well.
Yep, that's cool. And what what sort of clients do you work with over there? Just give me an idea of sort of the sweet spots for you.
Sure. Industrial automation, so like manufacturing and distribution and
Hmm.
healthcare is definitely core to who we were and who we are. However, we continue to grow in the e-commerce sector, even in
Hmm.
fashion and retail a little bit. But definitely a mix of both B2B and like direct to consumer work as well. And I think honestly, the pandemic has spurred and shifted some of that as well.
Sure has. Just a few things, Jon. Shifted a few things. Well,
Right.
shifting, and so to the theme of today's show, I want to talk about something that I found super important over the years, which was in a lot of companies I worked for. It was sales, get sales in, big sales teams, use Salesforce, right? We're going to force it. We're going to force those
Yeah.
sales, um, or we're going to build a force around sales and CRMs and all these different things. And I feel like over the years, because of automation and all these different things, that we've kind of left the experience out of what it's like to be a consumer or be a customer, right? So you and I have experienced great customer service and poor customer service. I think most people get that. And I don't claim to be a salesperson, but I do know what I like when I'm buying something. I do know what I want it to feel like when I'm buying something. So I know what not to do, I guess. Might not be the
Sure.
smartest in knowing what to do. But you talked about specifically the Michelin star standards. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that philosophy? Because I think that would be really helpful for the audience to understand how you've kind of taken this thing from sort of the food industry, well, the high end food industry, and applied it to your business.
Yeah, I do. Would it be helpful, Kurt, to maybe talk a little bit about breakthrough and how we got to the point of Michelin
Yeah,
star
that would
standards?
that would be
Okay,
perfect. Yeah, give us the story,
sure.
man.
Interject me if I get long-winded. So I started Breakthrough just to legitimize some side hustle. My first year of grad school, it was about 8 years ago, and I was still working full time. Just did enough work to make taxes cumbersome, and then I had the opportunity to go and work for Spider Trap, which was a pretty venerable digital agency here in Minneapolis, for a few years, and then Spider Trap went on to be acquired, and I hung my shingle out as a solopreneur at Breakthrough, and gradually kind of grew the team up to where we are today. And we were we have always been profitable and growing. We're just shy of 20 now, but a few years ago, our culture and our positioning was maybe lacking clarity and definition. And and again, that's something that the business was performing fine. It wasn't like
Sure.
inherently anything bad,
Yeah.
but it spurred me, and I think Kurt, this is maybe when we first met, but it spurred me to hire a business coach.
Hmm.
Ironically, it was like 6 months before COVID, but And the reasoning was twofold. It was one, for me to be a better leader, but two, to have more confidence and get more focus into where we were headed as a business. So some foundational work that laid the groundwork for Michelin star standards, which I know we'll talk more about, was first setting a strategic plan in place. So we used the scaling up methodology, which is very similar to EOS or traction, if you've heard of it. So we had a one-page strategic plan. Ironically, it is right behind me on the window, but it mapped out our 10-year. This is our 10-year goal. This is where we want to head to as an organization.
See, that's where I
our
want to
mission,
stop you
vision,
for a second,
values.
John, because that's where when I do a lot of coaching with folks, and
Yeah.
if there's one, usually the first conversation I'm having with them is, what is that longer term goal? And I'm telling you, the majority of them can't answer that question. They don't have a destination in mind. They are so busy trying to make tomorrow work, make sure the sun comes up tomorrow, I guess, then they are worried about, what things are going to look like further down the road. And when they do sit down to do that, it is pretty eye-opening. So I can imagine as you went through that process, it was pretty mind-blowing for you, I can imagine.
Using another word, I'd say uncomfortable. It was definitely, definitely mind-blowing and empowering, but uncomfortable, really, really hard. I think individually, that was the hardest thing for me to do on this whole journey, was to say, this is where I want to take breakthrough. And probably the most intensive or labor involved, and this kind of gets to my key take, was stress testing our core values. So, kind of from the cadence was cool. We were working on this strategic plan, including that like 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal, then bringing that kind of down to earth in 5, 3, 1-year increments, even 90-day increments.
Yeah.
And then the challenge was, all right, cool. What are the values that you need as an organization to help you achieve that, to guide you toward that 10-year goal? And my whole take on this, Kurt, is that core values define and position your culture and position your company, but truly committing to them will create opportunities and unlock success. So I meant, the 10-year goal was tremendously difficult for me. The most involved, but also empowering and rewarding thing for our organization was stress testing those core values and really leaning into them. And I think we have a couple of incremental progress markers today that I'd be happy to chat about as well.
Yeah. So tell me about let's talk about the Michelin star aspect. Did that come up through that process, or was that a result after all of that?
Yeah, it did. So as we're coming together with that plan, I was tasked to do a lot of reflection and a lot of reading. There is no shortage of great articles and insights around what constitute A, good core values, and then B, what are some of the outcomes of organizations that have committed to those. And then and another leader, my leadership team, we created a survey and some homework for the team to kind of prime everyone, saying, hey, we need you to take 30 to 60 minutes. We need you to read some of this, and we need you to think and reflect on who we are as a business, knowing this is where we want to get to. So a little pre-work that led to a team working session. We spent a couple hours and kind of brought our thoughts and whiteboarded everything together. From there, we kind of worked to develop a shared vernacular. We refined those, and then we defined our new core values. They're empathy, collective accountability, continuous improvement, and Michelin star standards. But that was only the beginning of the journey, right? Like putting them down on a piece of paper is the easiest thing to do.
Yes, it sure is.
How do you bring that further?
Yep. And that's where I find that people run into, and I did this as a leader, is that I would read those books and I would try to implement some of those things, but they don't really tell you how tactically to install those things. What do I do when this employee says, I'm confused by this, I don't understand this, or this other employee interprets them completely different, and
Yeah.
and weaponizes them. You know, there's all these things that you know, you can't really read in a book. I'm sorry.
I agree. I would say that I've
Yeah,
learned and worked through some of them.
you
So
do have to.
I can riff on that a little bit. So to start, I think um, in conversations with prospective clients or even new hires, I think this Michelin star thing has a lot of it can be really powerful, but if people don't understand the parallel to the restaurant industry, it really falls flat and it falls flat quickly. So should we maybe just
Yeah.
define and give a little context on what that is? Okay, so
Yes.
um, Michelin star, tremendous marketing, actually credited to the Michelin Tire Company in the 1920s. And what these marketers wanted to do is they created, I have a few of them, but read guidebooks called the Michelin Guide to go and they visited restaurants.
That's right. Get
And
some wear on
one
those
star was
tires.
right, yeah. So then that was their whole incentive. Like one was like worth a visit, two was to like, and I don't remember two, and the third one's to like take a day trip there to get more miles on those tires. Um, so tremendous marketing, still here today. It's shifted and evolved a little bit, but there's really five pillars to getting a Michelin star. And this is like the upper echelon, the 1% of restaurants in the world. Minnesota doesn't even have a Michelin star restaurant, and we have a thriving food scene.
Yeah.
But it quality of the products, mastery of the flavor, personality of the chef and their cuisine, value for money, and consistency. Consistency is a really big one. But what we did is we looked at those and we applied them to our service-based business. So we can, as we're establishing what does Michelin star standards mean for us at Breakthrough, it's the quality of the deliverables, one of which is our service, the mastery of our craft and technical related skills, the way our personality shines through our work and service, the value that we provide clients based on what they pay, and then
Mm-hmm.
consistency in deliverables,
Yep.
because it's such a consistency in deliverables across humans and even customizing that experience for users. And so we actually put an 8-week curriculum together this quarter to help our team get better acquainted with what it looks like to truly deliver on those Michelin star pillars. So again, we're pulling from the hospitality industry. So I think we had an assignment a week or every 2 weeks, but we watched episodes of Chef's Table on Netflix. We listened to a podcast from a restaurateur. We read a white paper published by Deloitte last year about the future of hotels as people-centered.
Mm-hmm.
We read another series, and we watched Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And then to cap it off, well, every week we would have a discussion, kind of some prompts around what we learned. And then to cap it off, we're going to have a private like dining and event experience with a chef to really discuss what Michelin star standards mean and how we can apply them. But your point is so tremendous in that like we really need to define what Michelin star standards means for us, and for us,
Right.
it means providing the highest level of service and results for our clients over the long term. So
Mm-hmm.
part of our brand promise is that results are table stakes, but long-term relationships of trust are our true ROI. Um,
Yeah.
you
Well,
can
and
you
what
can
I
find a lot of different.
what I
Go
love
ahead.
about it is that nothing you mentioned in those pillars is client focused necessarily. It is all, how are we doing this work? How are we providing this work? How are we being consistent? It's not, defining client engagements and all these different things that, or funnels and
Mhm.
all this stuff. It is, like you said, it's a real focus on the team and making sure that they are, they're geared up, right? They have they have the knowledge to be able to execute on it, and they're holding each other accountable too, right?
Yep.
Because it's not just John looming as an owner
No, not at all.
in all those situations. They should just know that this is how you break through. We did this at Foundry too. We came up with this when you first joined the company. We have a cheat sheet that's created that's called How to Foundry, and
Great.
it's literally everything you should know about how we approach our work. That we take our work extremely seriously, but we do not take ourselves seriously. And that and then how does that stem into the work that we do with our clients? Because we want the work that we do to be fun. We want people to have a good time while we're doing this very complex work. and we want it to be a fun experience for people. But if I can't if the team isn't having fun, to your point, Jon, the client's not going to have any fun, and people have asked, well, how has your company grown so much over the years? How did we make the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies 2 years in a row? And I say, because we've never lost clients, because we just keep adding clients because they're having a good experience working with us. And I attribute that 100% to the team. And so to you, what I love that you have spent time systematically putting together, not just values and like posted them on the wall, but actual like training and action steps to help the team understand the importance of it, to get into your mindset. I think that's just so important. I think that's the next level.
Thank you. It's hard, and we certainly have a long ways to go, but I think it sounds like you've adopted this at Foundry, and for us, our core values and Michelin star standard specifically, like, it's so interesting and powerful because of the duality in it's practical, that we can evaluate every facet of our business based on that standard, that high bar that we've internally aligned on, and hopefully that continues to be raised. But it's also aspirational in that it aligns with our mission and that 10-year goal. So I think back to my initial take of core values, really defining the culture and positioning of the company, but committing to them and leaning into them is what unlocks success. That initial phase of, me engaging a coach and then doing the strat plan and the stress, like that took about 18 months.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And that's really the tipping point when our company started to change. And that change was uncomfortable. I'm going to use that word often, I think. But we experienced, committing to that meant we experienced some shifts in our org chart, in the people on our team. We hired skill sets. We also really wanted to empower employees to start working on the business versus just in it. And that's a big cognitive shift, right? Like,
it is a big cognitive shift.
We created individual, department level, and company KPIs, key performance indicators, which, Kurt, that could be a whole nother episode. How to create KPIs in a company that's already running as a company. It was building the plane as we were flying it. And then we didn't do all this, like, this didn't happen overnight. So I think probably 12 months into that journey, maybe 15, we adopted quarterly rocks, like strategic priorities that one person in the organization owns, working on the business. And then another layer that I committed to initially was doing quarterly business reports. Like, I report out on our business performance and our progress quarterly to the team. The hardest part was just scheduling that meeting.
That transparency is huge, because again, especially in the business I'm in, a lot of the people are a little younger than me.
Sure.
That impact is so important for them to see the impact that their work is having, not just in their paychecks, but how is it impacting the larger organization, and how is their work impacting the larger organization? Too many companies miss that step, I think.
And it's not easy. I've done quarterly report outs when our performance was lackluster and it missed our goals. But then the challenge is, cool, how do we respond, team? It's not all roses and sunshine. However, as I mentioned, we have a long way to go, but we've really started to lean into these core values, and especially Michelin star standards. And we're seeing corresponding, positive trends in our business. And Kurt, I pulled this for getting ready for our chat today, but year over year, our profitability is probably pacing 10 to 12% above where it was last year. And our revenue is trending like 20 to 25% up. And I'll tell you that our team is more proud of that profitability number, because everyone understands how they are impacting our bottom line. And it's much more about that. And so, directional, but positive trend.
Yeah, well, and for our organization, we have profit sharing as part of our organization, where it makes it a very intentional conversation with people, where here's what profit sharing is going to look like this year. Here's the goals for it. Here's how it affects you personally. Here's how your work impacts that profitability. And letting them see, because there's been times where it's been not so great. And there's been times where it's been like, holy crap, I'm buying a boat. um, for these employees, and for them to be able to see how their work directly impacts that, and then getting benefits from it. Again, going back to driving the behaviors that keep the company successful, which in turn keeps them successful. It's not all about lake houses and Lambos for me and my partners. We definitely want to change the industry for a better. But if you can't do it with your own employees, how are you going to do it with your customers?
Wise words. I think as we lean into this, we're realizing that there's impacts to employee retention and recruitment.
Yeah.
Finding the right employees to the team that we're trying to build. That applies to the interview process. Explaining our core values, asking pointed questions, explaining where we're headed as a business. There's, the onboarding guide. I think you referenced something similar. We also developed a buddy system, developed by the team. I take no credit for this whatsoever, but it pairs a new hire with an existing team member in a different team for 6 months, and provide some structure. It's really about cultural onboarding. So I think there's bi-weekly, like 15-minute huddles. We support, or on breakthrough, you go to lunch and coffee a couple of times. And it's really just another person to provide that support and make sure that we all understand and are aligned around what we're doing here. There was a wellness program as well, but I think client retention and recruitment is another area that is impacted. We need to find and continue to work for the clients that fit where we're headed as a business. And so assessing client fit is difficult, and it can also be uncomfortable.
It can be.
But I think
I've fired clients before because they're not a good fit. And I would say, that's a really uncomfortable, it's a really uncomfortable situation. But again, back to, you can't just tell the team, do good work. And then you've got maybe this one client who's a super dick, right? That's just beating up your team, and they're tearing away at all the work you've done. And maybe they're paying you a ton of money or whatever, but how much is it worth to rehire those employees if they end up leaving? So you've got, and that's where I see back to leadership dragging, because leadership's job is to make those decisions, is to make the call. And when they're not making the call, that's when I see a lot of ambiguity, and that's when I see people leave organizations, not because necessarily they made a decision they didn't agree with, or they made a decision they agreed with. It's that ambiguity in the middle where it's muddy and weird and nobody's making a decision. That's where I've seen people say, like, you know what? I'm going to go to a place that has direction, and that's something. And again, I think that translates to the client experience in every single interaction.
Yeah. So the learning for us that is that we're pursuing fewer clients, but a deeper partnership with those clients. So I talked about long-term relationships of trust. We did an analysis early in 2020 and found that our average client duration was about 3.5 years. Pretty proud of that. But we can start sharing all this data and who we are and our core values and what we want to become to our prospective clients. And it allows you to have a candid and transparent conversation to really determine fit. But I couldn't agree with you more around, it's not necessarily making a right or wrong decision. It's the indecision that can really erode the trust in the organization and what you're trying to build.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what's your general cadence with the team? How often do you have all staff meetings? How often do you meet with individual team members? How often are you rolling out things? Is there a schedule for things? Are things more ad hoc? What have you seen work well for you in terms of, that communication?
Sure. I think sticking to the schedule is probably like the discipline to stick to the schedule is probably pretty important. So and some of this isn't, I don't know that we take an esoteric approach, but I'm happy to share. Mondays we do an all hands meeting. Leading up to that all hands meeting, each department kind of has a huddle. And then that huddle leads to a management huddle, and then we do our all hands meeting. One-on-ones between employees and their leads or managers happen weekly. I'm meeting with departments once or twice a week. We have internal statuses on every account, and then I think around that quarterly cadence is probably where we introduce new things. Like we introduced rocks last quarter,
Yep.
and it took about a quarter to prep for that, to explain what rocks are, how we're going to adopt them in our organization, what the cadence is going to be, figuring out like, are we doing them on a calendar 90 days or 90 days from when we close out the quarter, just some of that logistics and stuff.
Yep.
So we had a couple of working sessions on that. And again, the team, through working sessions and whiteboarding, the team figured out and prioritized, like, here's the laundry list of things that we could do to improve breakthrough, but here's the prioritized list, and here's what our rocks are going to be. So I think that quarterly structure is something that we're committing to that works pretty well. Additionally, I have time reserved on my calendar for Friday afternoon once a month for a pulse check. So that's 15 minutes that every team member has an option to just talk to me or another member of the leadership team about whatever they want.
Yep.
That's something that we came up with a few years ago, and it still is pretty valuable. But I think because our core values are really guiding that behavior. Like, we are a very supportive team, and we are very in sync from a communication standpoint. And I think, occasionally, sometimes you have to balance meeting fatigue, right? Or just going heads down and executing the work. So I think depending on client load and workload and traffic or whatever, we need to be flexible in that. But I'd say we're definitely meeting as a team once a week. You're meeting with a leadership member or a team lead once a week. You're meeting with your department weekly, and then you're tracking KPIs and reporting out on business performance at least quarterly.
Yeah, because to that point, the reason why I wanted to ask that is because what I found is that communication trumps everything else, right? So as we grew in the last few years from 2 people to 40 some people now, the one constant has been, we deliver communication. That's our main deliverable. Design, code, and all those other things are secondary. Everything that you basically have hired us for is second in my mind to delivering communication first. The work that we do is, and you do that, is very complex and takes skilled people to be able to perform those tasks. But what happens is that either people who are not doing that same job, maybe like you said, in another department, or even the client, which is even further out, don't understand that work that's happening. And they don't necessarily want to be trained in it, but they do need to have an understanding of what's actually happening. It's not a black hole. Because back, 10, 15 years ago, when we were running projects at other agencies I was at, it was pretty typical to be like, sign the scope of work, and then 6 months later, we'll go dark for 6 months. Yeah. And we'll show up and we'll show you this thing and say, this is what you asked for. And then people are like, that doesn't do what I wanted it to do. Well, that's your fault because you told us to build it this way, and we did it exactly how you told us. So pay us more money to fix it.
Yeah. I emphasized like internal communication from a client communication standpoint. Well, every client has at least 2 points of contact. We try and do weekly or bi-weekly status calls with clients, to just catch up, B, check in on if there are any updates in your business or the project that you're working on that we should be aware of, and then kind of share what we're working on. We also have a status report that'll get sent out by our project managers or our client engagement managers every week by the end of day Tuesday. So whether or not we have a status call or that person's traveling or just too busy, like, you are going to have that in your inbox. That'll give you line of sight, show you if we're red, green, or yellow, what we're waiting on you on, what we're working on. And it's a pretty good system. It's not like, sometimes we have to customize that. Like, we definitely, and this is actually an example of applying that Michelin star value differently to different clients. We have some clients in the e-com space that are tremendously data driven. Like you're, 20,000 plus SKUs on your e-commerce site, and we're managing search marketing. And so we're going deep into data.
Yep.
And other clients, we spent maybe a year customizing and tweaking a report and super metrics and Power My Analytics, ultimately to come to something that was pictures. It was much more visual and didn't provide nearly the same level of data. But that's something that a consistent theme that came up in that 8-week exercise was that, like, we have a framework and processes, but those get executed slightly different for every client. And like, that's the finesse and that's the gray area of Michelin star.
Yep. Yeah. That's the thing, is that, that's a very big value that we have at our organization too, is that, we bend to fit. We have a process that works, but we bend it to fit with where the client is at. Right. And to your point, if they want to look at, 0.000 metrics, that's cool. But some people just want to see momentum. Is there momentum? Well, I don't know how to put data in front of you to show momentum, but I can put some pictures in front of you to give you an idea. And that's okay. But if your team doesn't feel empowered, they're not going to make those changes, because they're going to be like, no, I worked with this client before that likes the 0.0000 displays. Yeah. So we got to show it to this client. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful. And having a culture where, let's really get to know this person as a human and understand how they best communicate, and then provide that information to them. It does, it's not a big step, but again, if the team doesn't feel like they're in a safe place to make those calls, they won't make those calls. They'll go back to what's in their job description. They'll rattle their job description in front of you and say, this is what you told me success looks like, not, doing this and this and this. And the people I've seen where they're doing that, it's because it's a terrible culture, and people are just trying to check boxes so that they can make sure that they get their paycheck,
Kurt, so interesting insight, because one of the changes that I wasn't planning on speaking to is we changed 2 or 3 roles, account service type roles on our team, to really elevate their standing and empower them to make with more decision-making authority and autonomy because of that.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And I've seen successful organizations time and time again do that. But it's a two-way street, right? You've got to have that person that's going to say, I will take accountability and responsibility for those decisions. And I don't know how many leaders I talk to, John, where they're like, oh, this team, they just won't go and make decisions without me. And I'm like, that's your fault. That's not their fault. Stop blaming the team, you dummy. Like, it's not their fault. If they're not making decisions on their own, it's because you have not empowered them to do so. You have not created a safe enough place where they can make these decisions that are either that could be have financial repercussions, and they know that they're not going to get fired. Yeah,
I think so. It's something that I continue to work on as a leader, but I think when I'm really aware of it, the team probably picks up on it, because I'll be in a meeting and I'll just be asking questions back, right? Like the most frustrating advice was like, what do you think I should do? Well, what do you think? What do you think you should do? Yeah. Or then I had a peer gave me a really good sequence. It was mirroring it back to, like, if you were in my seat, what do you think? What are the implications of that? Or once a decision's been made, like, help me understand X, Y, or Z. Like, help me understand why you made that decision. And it's more about, like, we will always have your back. Just make sure that we understand the rationale. But yeah, that authority can be intimidating to some individuals. So I think adopting that change, embracing that change is again part of that tipping point of it. It changed our culture and our positioning as a company a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that because again, you can't have it both ways. You can't be go and make those decisions. Why are you bothering me with these decisions? And then maybe one of those decisions turns out to be you lost the client because they made that decision, and you're coming in and now you're pulling out wires as the leader, trying to save the relationship and do all this stuff. And it's like, no, you gave that person the power to, like, now you should be asking them, like, so what are we going to do differently next time? Like, so it's okay.
So Kurt,
Go ahead.
I feel like I should take this opportunity in this public forum to just make a decree and a commitment to my team.
Oh, please do. I'm recording
the next
this,
time, right? And this is something that I'm actively working on. So I'm going to be vulnerable that the next time that there is a salad order placed, I won't scoff or make additional customizations or criticism, even constructive criticism, on my salad order. Okay, and I want that for the record.
All right, it's in the record.
It's something I'm working on.
It's in the record.
I'm not perfect, but we're gonna move forward.
Yeah, but that's my point. Leaders don't understand how many cues they give off to what is acceptable, and even a salad order. While it might sound funny, I remember when we were very young and we had 6 or 7 people. We're bringing on our new people. People would just watch the leadership team on when they went to lunch to know when it's okay to go to lunch.
Yeah.
Or where they went. And so we were at a co-working space at the time, and we would go pick up our lunch and bring it back. And I remember, like, somebody's like, "Oh, is it all right if we go somewhere and sit down and eat?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, we should really, but I'm thinking, but then, on my drive home, I'm thinking, if this is stuff that's going through their mind, why am I not helping them, get through that so they can focus on what they actually want to be doing, which is getting the work done, instead of thinking about, like, is it okay if I bring my own lunch? It seems like everybody here goes to lunch,
Yeah.
We don't even have a refrigerator. Oh, should we? Oh, you've been here for 6 months and, oh, you want a refrigerator? Oh, we'll just buy a refrigerator. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
but you got, again, as that leader, you've got to walk a little bit of a mile in their shoes to understand what it's like joining your organization. Having a good onboarding process is extremely valuable. And then also for the team, having a good offboarding process, which we all hate, but you've got to have a good offboarding process in place, because if work has to shift between people, what does that look like? How do people know what's going to happen? Because if maybe a key person leaves, they win the lottery and they're gone, that's the most positive way, right? So having those processes in place. And again, it's difficult as a leader in a smaller company, a sub 1,000 employee place, because you're in the work, you're talking to clients, you're doing some of the work sometimes. So it's hard to be thinking about these structural things. But if you don't take time to do that, you're going to pay for it later.
Well said. We're not. When the team is in the right mindset, it's easy to quickly, in my opinion, to be able to see what's possible by really committing to these. But go back to, like, the quarterly rocks and how long it took. Like, this is, you talked about change management and organizational change and consistent communication. Oh yeah. There was a couple, 2-3 learnings as we tried to roll out new stuff to the team. I'm on repeat saying embrace change. But we need to balance that. We need to not rock the fiber of our team. So it's definitely a balance.
Yeah, it really is. And if again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with reading those books or those leadership books, but make sure that's where I think my advice to leaders out there, whether you own a company or you're a manager or whatever level you are at, you're the team lead. Reading those books is great, but honestly, like my dad always said, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's people who have a coach, and then people who don't know they need a coach.
Hey.
So I would definitely strongly suggest, if you truly want to build those skills, especially when it comes to an employee engagement, go out and look for some help. Even if it's not a coach that you're, like, paying for, maybe build a small, like, local board of advisors, as you call it, your own personal board of advisors, people who are interested in your success, and maybe bring different things to the table from different experience and run things past them like you would a board of advisors. I think it's really healthy to not think that you have to think of everything.
Yeah, and I think coach can have a really broad connotation. And
Yes,
yeah,
right. Yes.
Kurt, you know this. There are so many people that I consider mentors or people I call for help or like, hey, I'm stuck. What should I do to try
Yep.
and work through that indecision? I think locally in the Twin Cities community, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, and I spent a decade of my career on the client side and people that I can call and ask for help. But absolutely, I recently I saw another smaller organization share like a pretty PDF on LinkedIn about their company culture, and they offer a wellness program that honestly was probably a step or two ahead of what we had done. And I reached out to that founder and I was like, hey, we're also doing a program like this, but I'm really interested in this like wellness concierge. Could we connect for coffee and
Oh,
talk more about it?
and I'm sure they're more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah. So there's no shortage of people that I will, shamelessly call for help and insight, and I hope to, gradually kind of even the scales back to be able
Yes.
to, to just continue to share insight and learnings to be part of that conversation. But I completely agree from the employee engagement standpoint.
It is, yeah, and that's the thing is like that's the thing I want make sure people watching this understand. Coaches are not just for CEOs or founders; they're for anybody
Yeah.
who's leading teams. You don't need some big fancy title to have a coach to help you manage and lead people. We're in such a different world these days because of things like account management, project management, product management, where we have so many leaders in organizations where those people they're managing are not reporting to them from an HR standpoint, but they are
Yep.
having to push those teams forward, but they can't fire the teams and they can't hire the teams. And this is something new that hasn't been around. Like 20 years ago, if they were on your team, they reported to you. These days,
Yep.
it's a very different situation, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for people out there to get better at this by seeking out coaches, by educating themselves. Go to Udemy or Teachable or these types of. There's tons of video content out there too that you can consume if you're not much of a reader. So podcasts are fantastic. There's people out there just giving away thousands and thousands of dollars of free consulting every single week. So in my mind, if you don't take the time to consume it, that's on you. We can always get better. You just got to be a little bit more disciplined, right?
Absolutely.
It's John. Yeah. So John, tell me about Breakthrough. Tell me about what are you hiring for right now? Who are you looking for?
Oh, well, we're hiring for a project manager or a client engagement manager. So that is one example of a role that we actually elevated to empower them with a bit more of a leadership role
Yep.
in their job and some decision-making authority. We just filled a role for a senior digital strategist, but we still have a posting up for that. We're hiring for a client strategist, so kind of an account manager. It's an account management
Mm-hmm.
based role, and then we have a couple of development based roles that could be coming up depending on Q4 budgets, which I'm sure you're also dealing with clients, just trying to forecast and plan for
Yes.
capacity, but not get too ahead of our skis.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so
I
that's
know.
what we're hiring for.
I know that feeling. Okay, cool. So if I want to know more about Breakthrough and the work you do there, John, like where do I go and find out more info? How do I get in touch with you folks?
Well, breakthrough.com is a great way. It's incorrectly spelled, but it is phonetically correct. So br8kthru.com. I would encourage you to find me on LinkedIn. Kurt, I envy your availability and ability to just constantly network and schedule, but I'm happy to hop on a call or do a coffee
Yeah.
and chat. But I'd say just about anyone on our team is getting used to being more open for networking virtually or in person. So yeah, we'd love to have a conversation as formal or informal as anyone would like.
Yeah, well, congratulations on all the growth and success, John. I mean, it's very well deserved. You've done a lot of great work, and your company does some fantastic work. And I definitely suggest people watching this go and check out the website, check out some of the case studies they have up there, the blog. They got some great stuff. So I definitely, I highly recommend checking it out. And so, Jon, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I always enjoy our conversations. I'm glad we got to get one live to share with folks, because this is how we, every time we talk, I was like, we got to record this sometime because this is great.
Fair enough. Thank you for the opportunity to chat live, for getting me uncomfortable and doing it, and the continued advisement, and the kind words about Breakthrough. As I said, our goals are both practical and aspirational, and I'm glad that we're at least pointed in the right direction.
That's great. Well, thanks, Jon. We'll see you soon. Okay.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, everyone. Speaking of hiring, did we talk about hiring enough in this episode? I don't know. Maybe. Anyways, check it out. This right here, foundrymakes.com/careers. I appreciate you taking time out of your day today. We're going to be back with some amazing shows over the next few weeks. I am so excited to talk to some of these people. And I've got a big reveal coming up soon. So if you're not subscribed or following me, make sure you do, because I've got some big news coming soon that I'm really going to be excited to share. So thanks again. We'll see you.